The child of the god of sky and earth, the god of desert Seth, died. The souls of the other world merged into Seth's body, becoming the new desert god. However, Seth's predetermined fate was to die at the hands of the new god king HorusSeth, in order to maintain his stable daily life, had no choice but to gradually seek the power of the gods and ascend to the highest position. Chapter 1. The God of the Desert. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kill the supreme god and seize the power of the sun in order to survive. A hoarse and dark murmur rang in my ear. Seth slowly opened his eyes, full of fatigue and helplessness. Sleeping for another year. Silently sighed, Seth glanced at the position of his heart. There is a crack that runs through the body, filled with the breath of death, darkness, and decay. If it were an ordinary person, he would have died long ago, but he is the god of the desert, only missing a part of his memory. Turning his gaze back, Seth glanced at the magnificent temple built by Huangsha. As desolate as ever, except for the walls, the murals on the dome, and his pedestal, there is nothing. Beyond the temple lies an endless expanse of desert. Having been in this world for decades, Seth has become accustomed to this desolate appearance. Of course, habit does not mean liking. No one rules that the god of the desert should like the desert. Seth propped up his face with one hand and sat on a pedestal made of yellow sand, lost in thought. Is there still no god looking for me? After muttering a word, Seth slowly extended his finger and pointed towards mid-air, saying a name. Antis. As the words fell, a clump of motionless yellow sand quickly gathered in mid-air. In the blink of an eye, the yellow sand transformed into a yellow sand bird, which landed on the ground and bowed down shouting. Master. Seth looked at the yellow sand bird and didn't say anything. Suddenly, Seth felt a sharp pain in his heart, and his face remained unchanged. Pop. The yellow sand bird burst out without a sound. The severe pain slowly subsided. Failed again. Seth anticipated it, in his memory. After the original Seth was injured, he returned to the temple to recuperate. But I didn't expect that I couldn't cure the injury myself, and the injury began to worsen. Later on, he even fell into a deep sleep from time to fully restrain the further deterioration of the injury. As a result, the original body cannot leave the throne for one step. After Seth arrived, he tried to summon his servants and seek help from the god of life. It is possible to give a servant a real name, which can use some divine power to prevent the injury from worsening. This forced Seth to give up his servants and regain his divine power. Proactively searching doesn't work, so Seth waited for other gods to come and find him. No god came, which left Seth speechless. However, what displeased Seth the most was the creator god. La. According to memory, this god holds the power of the sun and ascends to the highest position. He created all things in the world and the gods in a chaotic and great flood. However, when the world was born, a pitch-black demon snake named Apep leaped out of the great flood, blocking the light of the sun. The demon snake is enveloped in darkness, death, and chaos to attack and kill the sun, destroying the new world. The born gods rushed forward to fight, but were all repelled. At this moment, La went up to fight against the demon snake, and in the end, Apep was killed by La, and the sun shone again on the earth. But the demon snake has the power of death, and it will not really die. Therefore, whenever the demon snake is resurrected and darkness falls, La will kill the demon snake again. Unlike at the beginning of the world's birth, Ra now fights against the demon snake with the help of two main gods. The upper and lower gods under the main god have no ability to help. Coincidentally, Seth is one of the main deity ranks, and it is his turn to help pull and kill the demon snake with the wise god Thoth. In the past, La would stop all the attacks of the magic snake, but there was a mistake that time. As a result, Seth's heart was pierced by the fangs of the demon snake, causing serious injuries. After killing the demon snake, he did not help with treatment and instead sailed the eternal ship to the underworld for inspection. Seth informed Thoth that he was no longer on rotation and entered the temple deep in the desert for healing. The injuries gradually worsened until they could not leave the temple. Ra never cared about Seth's injury, and with Ra's strength, he could easily heal him. Both the original Seth and the current Seth are very dissatisfied. The words that awaken him from his slumber every time are probably the original obsession of Seth. Unfortunately, he couldn't defeat it. The power of the Supreme God is beyond his ability to resist. With a murmur, Seth changed his hand and propped his face, his eyes fixed on the desolate desert. Suddenly, Seth saw a woman standing outside the temple. Wearing a throne-style divine crown, black hair and red lips, and a blue and white woven linen long skirt. On the neck is a wesek made of lapis lazuli, rubies, blue crystals, and gold. The arms, wrists, and ankles are made of gold and adorned with intricate lotus patterns. Seeing this woman, Seth suspected that he had hallucinations. Is it just that God has hallucinations? The woman walked into the temple with a worried face and quickly approached Seth. Little brother. Upon hearing the sound and sensing the breath of God, Seth became excited. It wasn't an illusion, it was really Isis. Miss Isis. Inheriting Seth's original memory, Seth naturally called out, "Sister." He gave life to his servants in order to seek help from Isis. Isis. The god of life, magic, and marriage, with the main divine rank. In addition to Isis, he also has his brother Osiris and sister Nefertis. Father god Gabu and mother god Nut. The ones who gave birth to Gabe and Nut were Shu and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut were the first two gods created by La. Little brother, you're hurt like this, why don't you ask me for your help? Isis worried, but there was a hint of blame in her words. Seth's face showed bitterness and he said, I also want to ask for your help, sister. But my injury has deteriorated to the point where I cannot give my servant a real name. Upon hearing this, Isis felt heartbroken and took out a palm-sized sun-patterned pottery jar to hand over. Little brother, this is the blood that Lashen has given you, it can heal you. What was given by Ra-Shen? Seth was somewhat surprised. Isis nodded, you haven't appeared in decades, and you're not in the temple where you often stay. I, Osiris, and Nefertis are a bit worried about your injury. Coincidentally, this year is my rotation. After killing Apep, I raised this matter with the god of Ra and asked him to find your position. After Lashen found you, he gave you a drop of blood to help you recover. Seth looked at the sun-patterned pottery jar with a complex expression. The blood of the sun god is indeed enough to restore him to his original state, but it has been delayed for decades. Thank you, sister. Seth took the pottery jar and thanked Isis. Let's heal the injury first, Isis still worried about Seth. Seth nodded and opened the pottery jar, where a golden light burst forth. After a moment, the golden light dissipated, and Seth poured out a drop of golden blood from the pottery jar. The golden blood lay quietly in Seth's hand, and he could feel the incredibly hot and powerful power. That belongs to the blazing heat of the sun, as if being under the scorching sun. After watching the blood of the sun god for a while, Seth poured it into his mouth. Red divine lines appeared on Seth's skin one after another. And slowly gathered toward Seth's heart. The wound that runs through Seth's heart has also undergone a mutation, with black scales emerging, emitting a decaying aura of death. Moreover, those scales slowly formed the shape of a curved snake. Isis frowned on the side, increasingly worried about her younger brother. Chapter 2. Divine Discussion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Seth responded flawlessly to Isis's concerns at this moment, and the drop of blood he pulled burst forth with powerful force. The divine power that drives his whole body rushes into his heart. And a powerful force erupted from beside the heart, pouring into it. In just a moment, he was engulfed by the blood pulled out. Without waiting for the wound to erupt again, the blood drawn completely engulfed it. The wound that ran through his body quickly healed, and Seth closed his eyes, feeling the power of the desert god. Isis watched as the black scales on Seth's wound dissipated, sensing Seth's breath recovering, and couldn't help but smile. After a while, Seth opened his eyes and took a deep breath. He stood up from the throne, feeling no more weak. Wearing a Hokapi divine crown, white hair and golden pupils, and wearing a blue, red, and white linen skirt. The neck is made of lapis lazuli, topaz, and gold. Wearing golden rings engraved with yellow sand on arms, wrists, and ankles. At this moment, he is the true god of desert, power, and war in the position of the main deity. I remember all the memories lost due to injury. This world with gods is no different from the names of the ancient Egyptian gods in his memory. If nothing unexpected happens, it will be the world of ancient Egyptian mythology. Little brother, have you fully recovered? Isis asked with a smile. Seth nodded and said, everything has been restored. Then I can rest assured, Isis said. Originally, Seth wanted to ask Isis something, but an unexpected visitor came from outside the temple. A golden falcon flew into the temple and landed on the ground. It flashed with a golden light, transforming into a 10-year-old boy wearing a linen skirt. The little boy extended his hands forward and raised them slightly. Lord Seth, Lord Isis. Seth and Isis looked at each other in surprise at the appearance of the little boy. The falcon is the incarnation of the god of Ra, and they are also the messengers of Ra. Whenever La Shen has something to convey, he will use messengers to convey the message. Speak up, Seth looked at the messenger and said. The little boy raised his hand and said, 30 days from now, God Ra will convene a divine council in the pantheon. Upon hearing this, Seth was somewhat surprised. There are two types of divine discussions. One is the convening of the God of order to resolve disputes among the gods. One is convened by the supreme god to convey the oracle. According to his memory, the last time he convened a divine council was 1,000 years ago. It is to solve the situation where Osiris, Isis, he, and Nefertis are unable to ascend to the throne. The last time was 10,000 years ago, when I asked the gods to leave Sun City and build a temple on earth. Isis saw Seth lost in thought and waved to the waiting messenger. The messenger transformed into a golden falcon and flew out of the temple. Upon hearing the commotion, Seth withdrew from his memory and said, Sister Isis, did La Shen ever tell you about convening a divine council? After pondering for a moment, Isis said, Ra said there has been a new change in the underworld recently. Shani should be discussing matters related to the underworld. Seth searched for the underworld in his memory. But I found that there are very few memories about the underworld. He only knew that to enter the underworld, he had to go to the west of the Nile River, which had been turned into a great flood. There is a tributary of the Nile River called the Styx. Covered in cold white mist all year round, there is no life, only dead spirits. At the end of the Styx River is the gate of the underworld. The undead will jump into the Styx and follow the river into the underworld, waiting for new life. In addition, after killing a pep, La will embark on a journey into the underworld on a perpetual ship. Seth has never entered the underworld and has never understood it, so he only knows these things. Little brother, Thoth once said that the breath in the underworld will erode everything that has life. Isis patted Seth's shoulder and said, even gods can be eroded. The underworld is not related to our authority, there is no need to care. Seth feels that he has just recovered and should enjoy the pleasure of being a god. What you should care about is Nefertis, Isis smiled. Upon hearing this, Seth coughed twice and looked at Isis incredulously. Isis smiled brightly and said, little brother, don't hide it. Your love for Nefertis is undisclosed, I already know. During the decades when you disappeared, Nefertis often came to me to inquire about your news. She often goes to your temple to find you. Obviously, she loves you. Now that you have returned to your original state, marry Nefertis. No. Seth firmly refused, Sister Isis, I no longer admire Nefertis. According to memory, the original Seth did indeed love Nefertis. But Seth never showed his love to Nefertis. If it were the original Seth, he would definitely listen to Isis's words. But now Seth can clearly remember a myth. Seth was jealous of Osiris's reputation, jealous that Nefertis loved Osiris, and chose to kill Osiris. The first time Osiris was resurrected by Isis. The second time Seth killed Osiris again and dismembered him, throwing him into the Nile River. Isis and Nefertis searched for the body of Osiris, but they were always missing a piece. Without one piece, Osiris cannot be resurrected again. Unfortunately, Isis chose to conceive Osiris's child, hoping that the child would grow up and seek revenge against Seth. After Seth learned about it, he chased after Isis and the Horus she gave birth to. Nefertis helped Isis and Horus escape. She and Seth's son Anubis were asked to mummy Osiris and send him to the underworld to become the underworld king. Not only that, she also helped Horus defeat Seth when he grew up. Nefertis did this because she loved Osiris. Anubis is also her child with Osiris. With this memory, Seth will never let it happen. Isis felt strange as she looked at Seth's determined expression. The love that has lasted for thousands of years suddenly disappeared. Seth looked directly at Isis and said, "Sister, I really no longer love Nefertis." The golden pupils are filled with honesty. When Isis mentioned Nefertis in Seth, she did not feel any love in his eyes. She accepted this fact. Ah, Nefertis is going to be sad. Seth averted his gaze and thought to himself, he was certain that Nefertis would not be sad, and it was only Isis who was sad. According to memory, Isis and Osiris have already married. According to mythology, it is Mr. Nefertis who descended from Anubis. "Sister, the blue gold god also admires Nefertis," Seth said. "You can go find the blue gold god and let him show his love." Isis was worried about him and asked for help from La, so Seth naturally didn't want Isis to be sad. Chapter 3. Evil Gods and Beliefs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The god of blue gold. Isis muttered, "Does he love Nefertis?" Love. Seth was very certain. The original Seth learned of this news and specifically sought confirmation from the blue gold god. After receiving a positive answer, he beat up the blue gold god. "Okay, I'll go find him." Isis made a decision. He also reminded Seth to mobilize his divine power to wash away his divine body, so as not to leave behind any hidden means for Apep. Apep's leadership is chaotic, lacking wisdom, yet his methods are eerie and obscure. "I know," Seth nodded earnestly. "It's about himself, he definitely mobilizes his divine power to wash away his divine body every day." Isis turned into a gust of wind and left, appearing very anxious. Seth understands that God's authority determines God's power. Like Isis, the triple authority of magic, life, and marriage. She wants to enhance her strength, and the most convenient way is to encourage God to marry God. The marriage of God can greatly increase her strength. On the other hand, if a species with life dies in large numbers, those who have formed marriages will dissolve their marriages in large numbers, and those who learn magic will decrease significantly. Although still holding triple power, Isis's power will be greatly weakened. His elder sister is arrogant and won't tolerate herself becoming weak. Set shook his head and stopped thinking about these things, then spoke up. "Ago." A gust of wind and sand blew by, forming a huge yellow sand bird completely condensed from yellow sand. "Master." Set stepped into the air and sat down on the back of the flying bird, saying, "Go to the nearest oasis." The yellow sand bird flapped its wings and flew towards the south. According to memory, 80% of the world created by La is a desert covered with yellow sand. The remaining 20% are grasslands and forests formed by the Nile River and its tributaries, which were transformed by the Great Flood. And there are oases of all sizes in the desert. The original Seth did not pay much attention to the humans created by La, even though they worshipped and believed in him. Seth wants to meet humans and taste human food, by the way. The flavor of food from another world makes people drool when they think about it. Suddenly, a black snake with wings and bright red eyes roared and flew toward Seth. The yellow sand bird turned around and opened its mouth, spitting out a gust of sand and hitting the black snake. In an instant, the black snake turned into flesh foam and fell to the ground with the wind and sand. The yellow sand bird turned its head and continued on its journey. Seth doesn't care about this. There are monsters living in the desert that have been contaminated with a pep's blood. They, like a pep, lack intelligence, madness, and enjoy destruction. But in general, they will avoid oases, temples, and gods. However, some crazy monsters are not afraid and instead rush forward to fight. Suddenly, a long white feather floated in front of Seth. The power of truth attached to feathers is Mat's feather. The Lord God Mat. The God of truth, justice, and fairness. What did she find herself to do? With curiosity, Seth reached out and touched the feather. In an instant, the feathers disintegrated and turned into sacred texts. The sacred script belongs to pictographic writing. After a glance, Seth understood what was going on. According to Mat, an evil god appeared on a nearby oasis. Seth happens to be nearby, so we need Seth to destroy that oasis. Evil gods. Seth muttered, causing the yellow sand bird to fly towards the oasis where the accident occurred. Half a sunny day later, the yellow sand bird arrived over the oasis where the accident occurred. Seth sat on the divine throne on the back of the yellow sand bird and looked down. Hundreds of miles of oasis are covered with green plants, and the lake water is clear to the bottom, with red fish swimming one after another. On the outermost lakeside, women do laundry and chat, while men go into the water to catch fish. After catching the red fish, the men walked towards the center of the oasis holding the red fish. In the center of the oasis, wooden houses are arranged in an orderly manner. Children shuttle and play barefoot among them. Looking at this scene alone, the oasis seems like a paradise on earth. Seth set his gaze on the only stone building in the center of the oasis. A stone temple. The smooth stone is painted with unknown patterns, which looks particularly beautiful. The people of Oasis kneel and pray devoutly in front of the temple. A man knelt in front of the stone hall and said, "Almighty God, grant us a bountiful harvest." At the same time, a blank force emerged. Next came a woman who knelt in front of the stone hall and said, "Almighty God, grant me health." That blank force has once again emerged. This power fell into the stone building and quickly became eerie. Faith gave birth to evil gods. Seth confirmed Seth's original memory. When humans pray devoutly, they generate a blank power. If God is integrated into oneself, it will contaminate one's own divine power and authority. If living organisms are integrated into themselves, they will be driven by faith and become evil gods. Seth took out his anka, which was only the size of a palm. It looks like a cross, but the upper part is not a cross, but an ellipse. This is the condensation of the power of every god when they are born, carrying the breath of God. Seth threw anka below. Anka fell for a moment and then suspended above the oasis, emitting a soft white light. This light enveloped the entire oasis. At this moment, everyone on the oasis looked up at the light in mid-air. Suddenly, a green light rushed out of the temple in the center of the oasis and flew towards the desert. But at the edge of the oasis, the soft white light blocked him. Seth felt a pang of nausea as he looked at the evil gods, half of whom were robust young men and half were covered in black scales and lizard-like creatures. Obviously, a monster broke into the oasis and absorbed the power of those blank beliefs. People on the edge of the oasis see monsters and frantically worship and pray. The power of the blank faith fell on the monster, and in the blink of an eye, it was absorbed and turned evil. At the same time, Seth noticed that the monster's scales had shed some and became more human-like. The monster looked up at Seth's position and opened its mouth to make a sound. I am. God. The God who bestows upon them a bountiful harvest and health. Seth glanced at the monster and reached out to nod at the man kneeling near it. In an instant, the man turned into yellow sand and scattered it on the green grass. The people around saw this scene, screaming and crying. But in the end, they coincidentally prayed to the monster. God, Almighty God, please resurrect NAC. The power of emptiness fell on the monster with devout prayers. The monster's expression changed and he said, I am God, the God of resurrecting people. After stuttering, the monster exhaled a green mist that enveloped the yellow sand that the man had turned into. After a moment, the green mist dissipated and the recently deceased man appeared in place. Then, it turned into yellow sand collapse again. The people of the monster and Oasis were stunned. Seth had already known the outcome, and the power of faith does not represent authority. Without authority, one cannot exercise corresponding power. Moreover, the prayers of believers can change God's mind. How can such a God be considered a God? Chapter 4. Oasis. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Seth glanced at the desert on the edge of the oasis. The endless yellow sand seemed to have life, quickly devouring the oasis. The evil god recovered from his inability to resurrect the dead and attempted to charge toward Seth. However, the powerful divine power emanating from Enka bound him firmly in place. Believers face the disappearance of the oasis, and the devouring of yellow sand quickly escapes without escape. They knelt together on the ground, devoutly praying to the evil gods. Numerous blank powers fell on the evil gods, becoming evil and strange. At the same time, he kept struggling and his appearance was also undergoing transformation. Not long after, he became a real person. You can't kill my followers. The evil god looked up and roared angrily at Seth. Seth did not respond. In fact, if possible, he was too lazy to kill the evil god by hand. The problem is that after the evil gods absorb enough faith, they will perceive something. The power of faith enables them to do some of the things that believers pray for. For example, harvest and health are supported by the power of faith. Once the power of faith transformation is exhausted, harvest will turn into plague, health into death. This strong contrast can lead evil gods to seek power, thus attacking and hunting the gods, while craving more faith. Unfortunately, evil gods cannot win against gods with power, even weak lower gods. Perhaps after evil gods have enough faith, they can hunt down lower gods. But the gods will not allow evil gods to grow to that extent. Ah! Suddenly, the evil god let out a scream. Countless pitch-black scales sprouted from his body, and his bones were also changing. Seth glanced at the remaining oasis, which only allowed 2 people to stand. There is only one girl who keeps praying, the last believer of the evil god. She prayed in her mouth, praying to survive. Unfortunately, the yellow sand eventually devoured her. The oasis is completely buried under the yellow sand and becomes a part of the desert. At the same time, the evil god completely shed his human appearance and turned into a huge black lizard. Without believers, one no longer possesses power. Seth retrieved Enka and the lizard fell onto the desert. Swallowed by the surging yellow sand, it turned into meat foam. At this point, the evil god and his followers all died. Sitting on the back of a flying bird in the yellow sand, Seth raised his hand and wrote a series of sacred texts, recording the affairs of evil gods and believers. After he finished writing the last word, these sacred texts twisted and merged into a palm-sized yellow sand bird. Go find Matt, said Seth. The yellow sand bird flapped its wings and quickly disappeared from Seth's sight. As long as Matt is not seriously injured like him or intentionally closes herself, she will see it. Go to the nearest oasis, said Seth. Yes, master, the yellow sand bird respectfully replied. The pungent aroma of spices, the scent of cattle, sheep, camels, and other livestock, as well as the smell of baked cakes, grilled meat and barley wine, permeate this oasis that relies on the tributaries of the Nile River. Seth transformed into an ordinary young man, walking among the passing pedestrians. Decades later, seeing and encountering living people again, Seth realized that he was not too excited. In fact, when dealing with evil gods, he had already realized it. For humans, they cast gaze from a divine perspective. In short, his self-awareness is divine, not human. So, killing all those who believe in evil gods doesn't cause much turmoil in his heart. Is it because it blends Seth's memories? Seth muttered, ultimately not delving deeper. Fusion is irreversible, he just needs to know that he is Seth now. After solving a problem, Seth quickly walked to a stall selling pancakes. The golden-baked pancakes were piled aside, emitting a tempting aroma. "Little brother, how many cakes do you want?" the chubby vendor asked with a smile, wearing a skirt. "3. Seth asked, "How much is it?" 6 copper coins, the vendor laughed. Seth took out 6 copper coins and handed them over, receiving 3 pancakes. After receiving it, Seth couldn't wait to eat it. The sweetness brought by chewing starch is enough to satisfy Seth for a moment. While eating, Seth walked towards the center of the oasis. In the center of the oasis is a small town surrounded by wood, and there should be more delicious food inside. Along the way, Seth stopped in front of a woman's stall wearing a linen dress with great interest. It's not for any other reason, but because women are performing magic to the onlookers. "The source of magic, please grant your followers the power to control water," the woman whispered. The next moment, a ball of water the size of a human head appeared in her hand. Watching in astonishment, several merchants even threw copper coins at the woman's feet. Seth bit the cake and left, feeling disappointed because her magic was too weak. However, Seth remembers Isis mentioning it. She has the power to restrict creatures from casting magic. I didn't say much about the specific reasons, but she does have limitations. After all, magic belongs to Isis, and it's too simple for her to impose restrictions. There is an abandoned well deep in the desert. An exaggerated and high-pitched female voice reached Seth's ears. Swallowing the last bite of the pancake, Seth followed the sound. "I saw dozens of men gathered in front of a camel carrying about 10 bulging bags. In front of the camel stood a young girl with wheat skin, green pupils, and 2 golden rings on her ears. She made an exaggerated expression and said to the people around her, 'I dug in that dry well all day. At night, I prayed to the moon god for half a day again. And then I dug up this big bag of gold.'" After speaking, the girl untied a cloth bag carried by the camel, revealing the gold inside. In an instant, the eyes of those around me lit up. A few people wanted to reach out and touch, but the girl rudely opened their hands and tied the cloth bag tightly. "Don't touch it, I haven't touched it carefully yet." A bald man who was watching, his eyes full of doubt, said, "Are you really willing to hand over the map?" "Of course, how could I possibly deceive you?" the girl answered firmly. Seth looked at it with great interest, even buying a piece of grilled meat and eating it while watching. God deceives people to dig gold in the desert, which is a rare scene. "There's a lot of gold in that well, and I can't dig it all by myself," the girl shrugged and said, "Why don't we share it and everyone go dig it?" After speaking, the girl took out a stack of papyrus from the bag on the camel's body and distributed it to the onlookers. The map was quickly distributed, with continuous distribution and grabbing. The people who received the map left immediately. Seth curiously glanced at the map in one of the people's hands. The crooked and twisted lines, the annotations in secular script, are fake at a glance. "Is grilled meat delicious?" Upon hearing these words, Seth looked at the girl walking in front of him and smiled. "The spicy grilled meat is not bad. Really, I'll give it a try too." The girl walked to the place where Seth had just bought barbecue and also bought a portion. Chapter 5. Cat Scam. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The girl bought grilled meat and took 2 bites. She shook her head in disgust and said, "It's not spicy at all." Seth swallowed the grilled meat in 3 bites and threw the wooden skewer aside. "I actually like the spiciness." The girl pouted and said, "Seth, I heard from Sekhmet that you are missing." "Just hide and heal," Seth said. "A pep's power can counter our Shen." "That's right," the girl nodded. "Beth, is there anything delicious in the city?" Seth said the girl's name and asked. "The main god, Beth, is the god of cats, guardians, and dance." After thinking for a moment, Beth said, "There's a person in the city who cooks very delicious snake meat. However, he took the map I gave him and went to dig for gold. Besides, there's nothing delicious to eat either. There are no good spice merchants or merchants in this oasis." Seth also became curious upon hearing this. Is it fun to deceive people? In his memory, Beth often appeared in human gathering places, playing tricks on humans in various identities. The most typical example is to induce people to dig for gold. Just like just now, tell everyone that there is gold somewhere. As long as you follow the map, you can dig out a large amount of gold. Then a group of people will follow the map to dig for gold. The same route, every time someone falls for it, and Beth enjoys playing it tirelessly. Beth shook her head and denied, "I'm not lying. The map does indeed record a precious thing. Just that group of people haven't dug it up yet. When they do, you'll know." "I hope that day arrives soon," said Seth with a smile. "That day came, maybe it wouldn't be a good thing," Beth muttered softly. Seth listened clearly and didn't continue the topic. He only said, "Since there's no good food here, I'll leave first." Beth nodded slightly. Leaving the crowd and out of the oasis, Seth calls out the yellow sand bird. He was not in a hurry to go to the next oasis, but instead let the yellow sand bird fly to a place. 5 days later, Seth stood in mid-air, looking at the empty desert, feeling as if he had been deceived. There is not a single well here. To be precise, there is nothing here. He only came here based on his memory out of curiosity about Beth's language. As the god of the desert, he can be certain that there is nothing here. I have also become a victim of the cat scam, and I took the initiative to fall for it myself. Seth smiled helplessly. Forget it, go to the nearby oasis. Sitting back on the back of the flying bird in the yellow sand, Seth pondered some things. Suddenly, a palm-sized house floated in front of Seth. Seth frowned and it was Nefertiti's letter. The main god Nefertis. The guardian god of childbirth, housing, and the dead. He doesn't want to have any involvement with Nefertis. But we cannot let Exion continue to follow. I have no choice but to open a letter about the characteristics of the competition. The content is roughly about caring and greeting Seth. Gentle care is not something Seth noticed, what he noticed is. Nefertis learned that Seth had recovered through a letter from Isis to Osiris. And she said she and Osiris were both very happy. Let's not talk about why Isis didn't tell Nefertis. Just the combination of the names Nefertis and Osiris made Seth feel uncomfortable. There is always a feeling that Isis will be betrayed. Rubbing his eyebrows, Seth felt a slight headache. He is most familiar with ancient Egyptian mythology, which is the story of the dog-blooded Seth killing Osiris. He has little knowledge of other stories. This is not the point is that he is actually not sure that things will develop as he knows. He avoided Nefertis because he couldn't afford the consequences. The problem now is that Seth doesn't want to see Isis sad. This elder sister cares about him, helps him, and he wants her to be happy. But he can't say, "Sister, Nefertis is flirting with Osiris and will still have a child." What didn't happen, he said, would actually undermine Isis's trust in him. After much thought, Seth decided to go find Osiris. Isis should be busy matchmaking for the marriage of the gods, and he happened to be looking at Osiris. By the way, give Osiris some eye drops to prevent him from betraying Isis. After the decision was made, Seth raised his hand and wrote thank you, and then the holy script changed to yellow sand and flying birds leaving. After finishing, Seth sent another letter to Isis. Ask her where Osiris is recently, he wants to find him. While waiting for Isis to receive a letter and reply, Seth strolled around the nearby oasis. Unfortunately, this oasis is not large and there are hardly any spice merchants coming. Fortunately, the people living here brew very delicious barley beer. Seth wiped away the hops from his mouth and said to the old man selling alcohol, "Have another glass." "Okay," the old man responded enthusiastically. Turning around, he took a glass of beer from a half-person tall pottery jar. The aroma of barley fermentation, with a hint of sweetness. Seth ate a piece of fried snake meat and took a sip of wine, feeling relieved. After eating and drinking enough, Seth specially bought a pottery jar of wine to carry with him. Quan Dang is the gift for meeting Osiris. Sitting on the back of the yellow sand bird, Seth made it fly towards the temple where Osiris often stayed. He took a nap himself. When Seth wakes up, night has already fallen. Today is the new moon, and the starlight of the stars in the sky is particularly bright, as if to replace moonlight to shine on the earth. Seth looked at the stars, pondering how long they could still shine. How long before the father god Kebu and mother god Nut, who gave birth to their 4 gods, bow down to them. It should be fast, Seth muttered to himself. Immediately forget about this matter temporarily. The father and mother gods had already decided how to repay the loss of their divine power, which almost prevented them from ascending to the throne. Now Seth feels that the original decision was good, just wait for the opportunity to come. At this moment, a green sleeping lotus floated in front of Seth, with the scent of Isis attached to it. The competition features a lotus flower. The sleeping lotus disintegrated into a series of sacred texts. Quickly finished reading, Seth scattered the text. Nefertus has already rejected the blue gold god, in his 30th year of serious injury and disappearance. Seth admired the blue gold god somewhat. After being severely beaten by the original Seth, he dared to pursue Nefertus while Seth was recovering from his injury. Is he not afraid to hit Seth again after he recovers? It seems that this blue gold god really likes Nefertus. However, he has already been rejected. Isis also said that Osiris is in the temple where he often resides. At the same time, let Seth personally meet Nefertus once. She didn't tell Nefertus that he had recovered. Tisk, it's a pity she already knew from Osiris. Seth squinted his eyes and took out Anka. Anka, shaped like an oval and half-cross, was placed on the back of a yellow sand bird by Seth. The powerful divine power poured into the body of the yellow sand flying bird, making its speed 100 times faster. The fastest speed, Seth said, wanting to get to Osiris' temple as soon as possible. Yes, master. The yellow sand bird responded by flapping its wings. Chapter 6. Hator's Seeds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The border between forests and grasslands. The massive tree with lush branches and leaves built the prototype of the temple, with vines filling the gaps and golden and blue flowers blooming on it. If possible, Seth would like to take a closer look at this plant temple. Unfortunately, if not, when he arrived here, Nefertus also arrived. The two met like this. Brother Seth, long time no see. Seth looked at Nefertus sitting on the small house with a soft face. On her golden long hair was a divine crown resembling a vine blue, with brown pupils and a delicate face, wearing a blue and white linen long skirt. On the neck is a wesek made of lapis lazuli, black crystal, sapphire, and gold. Wearing gold rings with intricate patterns engraved on the arms, wrists, and ankles. This is Nefertus, the goddess that Seth once admired. To be fair, Seth believes that Nefertus is indeed beautiful. But in the face of death, beauty is not as good as sand. Seth smiled and said, Sister Nefertus. I feel genuinely happy to see you safe and sound, Nefertis said with sincerity on her face. Thank you, Seth thanked and asked, what are you doing with Osiris, brother? Nefertis took out a white crystal, which contained 10 green seeds. Hator asked me to hand over these seeds to Osiris, brother. Upon hearing Hator's name, Seth was taken aback. The main god Hator. The god of love, beauty, and music. She usually stays in the temples in Sun City and rarely appears in the sight of the gods. What seed is this? Seth asked with curiosity. Nefertis shook her head and said, I don't know, she didn't say anything. Let's hand over the seeds to Osiris, brother, who is currently studying these seeds. Perhaps Osiris, brother, knows what it is. Seth nodded. Yellow sand birds and small houses landed at the entrance of the temple. Seth immediately saw Osiris staring at a golden, plump grain of wheat in the temple. Nefertis crossed Seth and walked into the temple. Osiris put down the wheat ear, smiled at Nefertis, and saw Seth again. He immediately stood up and walked up to Seth, carefully scrutinizing Seth before taking a deep breath. I'm glad you've recovered, my brother. Seth looked at the wheat ear crown on his head, with green skin, golden pupils, and a tuft of beard tied up by a bronze ring on his chin. Wearing a blue linen skirt, wearing a wesek made of lapis lazuli, emerald, blue crystal, and gold on the neck. A strong man wearing a golden ring engraved with divine patterns on his wrist, arms, and ankles. This is the main deity, Osiris. The god of agriculture, plants, and abundance. A question arose in Seth's mind for no reason: why is Osiris green? He, Isis, and Nefertis all have normal skin colors. Is it because the boss has mutated? Roast in the heart is roast. Seth still feels sincere brotherhood in Osiris' words. Thanks to Sister Isis, Seth laughed. In short, you have recovered. Osiris smiled. Osiris, brother, Hadaletto, I'll bring you some seeds, Nefertis exclaimed. Seth walked into the temple and took over the conversation, saying, Hator didn't say what kind of seed it was. Big brother, do you recognize these seeds? Nefertis handed the crystal containing the seeds to Osiris. Taking the crystal and opening it, Osiris placed the seed in his palm. The warm green light flickered, indicating that Osiris was using divine power. After a moment, Osiris excitedly said, These are barley seeds that contain the breath of the sun, with stronger vitality. Even if growing in desert oases, there will no longer be a decrease in yield. Seth thought of the merchants walking between various oases in the desert. They sell fur, young beasts, slaves, gold, and gemstones. However, the most common and in greatest demand are grains, as well as spices. Some oases do not grow food, only high-value spices, in exchange for food and other goods. The reason why we know these things is because many people have prayed more than once in the temple of the desert god. Prayed for Seth to have a bountiful harvest of the wheat seeds they planted, and some even conducted live sacrifices. Unfortunately, the original Seth never responded to them. Firstly, the authority over fertility and agriculture belongs to Osiris. Secondly, he hopes that the oasis will lack food. In that case, they will definitely launch a war, and Seth, as the god of war, naturally enjoys seeing war. Now Seth feels that the original Seth did the right thing. Meanwhile, he also knew that Osiris intended to use these seeds to expand his power. Osiris, brother, that's great. Didn't you always want to cultivate seeds that don't decrease in yield in the desert? Nefertis said with a smile. Yeah. Osiris remained excited. I was planning to give up originally. With my authority, I cannot influence the desert. Upon hearing this, Seth thought of the origin of Hator, who was a god transformed from the left eye of our god. It is not difficult to produce seeds that contain the breath of the sun. Nefertis then showed a hint of concern. Brother Osiris, can these seeds be planted in the desert? If possible, if those humans plant and breed them in the desert, the desert will definitely disappear. So Brother Seth's authority will be damaged. Both inside and outside of the conversation, I was worried about Seth. But Seth always felt that these words were a bit teasing. Is it his illusion? Considering that it was possible that the myth had influenced his view of Nefertis, Seth spoke up, it won't have an impact on the desert. The desert is completely under his control, unless it is the ultimate god or anyone who obtains his true name. Otherwise, he can control what can and cannot live in the desert. Upon hearing this, Osiris looked at Seth seriously and said, "Don't worry, these seeds cannot be planted in the sandy soil." "I believe you, big brother," Seth laughed. This is his conclusion based on memory. In the original memory of Seth, Osiris was an honest and very candid elder brother. Of course, this side is for the three of them. If Nefertis really had the intention of colluding with Osiris, she might have taken advantage of it. "That's really great," Nefertis said in a voice. "Osiris brother, give them to the human tribe that believes in you as soon as possible." "Don't worry for now," Osiris shook his head. "I need to breed enough seeds first." "Big brother, did you ask Hator to cultivate seeds?" Seth still cares about Hator. After all, his real name is unknown to no one except himself, and the name Seth is a pseudonym with no power. The only thing that can affect the desert and shake its power roots is the power of the sun god. Chapter 7. Love. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Osiris collected the seeds and shook his head, saying, "I didn't ask Hator to cultivate barley seeds. She has almost always stayed in the temple of the Sun City, and I have never seen her privately." Seth looked at Nefertis, who was delivering the seeds, and said, "Little sister, did you ask Hator?" "No," Nefertis denied and explained, "Our God is going to convene a divine council. I had nothing to do, so I went to the city of the sun first. Hator came to my door and asked me to hand over the seeds to Osiris brother. After the divine deliberation, thank her and ask her by the way," said Osiris. Seth's mind flashed with many speculations, but they were all unfounded and could only be done according to what Osiris had said. Turning this matter over for the time being, Seth took out the barley beer he bought in Oasis. "Try it, it's made by humans." Osiris became interested and said, "Okay." Nefertis stared at Seth, as if she had met him on the first day. "Brother Seth, have you gone to the human gathering place?" Seth nodded and said, "Yes. Staying in the temple for too long, it's too stuffy." Upon hearing this, Nefertis didn't say anything more, only a hint of anxiety flashed in her eyes. "Among all the things created by God Law, humans are the most interesting," Osiris laughed. "Indeed," Seth agreed. Nefertis didn't say anything, just smiled. Then Seth distributed the beer to Osiris and Nefertis. "The fermentation is pretty good, it's the taste of desert barley," Osiris commented after taking a sip. Seth nodded in agreement, while also thinking about the sun wine in Sun City. According to his fused memory, the sun wine brewed by La Shen is an unparalleled treasure. Unfortunately, the last time they drank sun wine, it was a gift from when they became the Lord God. If you want to drink it again, unless there is a new god born. However, among the thousands of gods, there are only over 20 main gods. It can be said that hope is slim. "Seth, why are you suddenly unhappy?" Osiris noticed Seth's emotions and asked with concern. Seth sighed and said, "I thought of La Shen's sun wine." Osiris understood and sighed, "I understand you." Regretting each other for a while, Seth, Osiris, and Nefertis chatted and drank. Of course, the main conversation was between Seth and Osiris. Nefertis watched from the side, occasionally interjecting a sentence. "Brother, there is someone offering sacrifices in the nearby temple. I'll go there." Suddenly, Osiris said to Seth. After speaking, Osiris gave a particularly meaningful smile as he rushed to the race. Then he quickly left the temple. Seth was confused and didn't understand why Osiris was laughing so much. Until Seth saw Nefertis on the side. She looked at herself shyly, her eyes filled with different emotions. At this moment, Seth understood why Osiris was laughing so much, and he really wanted to call Osiris back. "Brother Seth," Nefertis said softly, "the blue-gold god moth has come to find me." Seth didn't know what to say, just let out a Nefertis slowly approached Seth. "He showed his love to me and wanted to marry me." Seth responded silently. He knew about this because he told Isis that the blue-gold god loved Nefertis. Nefertis saw Seth's face as usual and bit her lips, saying, "I rejected Mot." "Do you know why, brother Seth?" "I don't know," Seth shook his head and said, "By the way, there's something I want to ask you." "What's up?" Nefertis was taken aback. Seth put down his wooden cup and curled the corner of his mouth, saying, "Are you familiar with Beth? I want to know what she likes and doesn't like." Upon hearing this, Nefertis looked incredulous and said, "Brother Seth, do you admire Beth?" "Yes," Seth admitted with a smile. Nefertis's eyes were filled with tears as she hurriedly turned around and said, "I'm so happy. Brother Seth, you have someone you like, I'm really happy for you." "Thank you," Seth asked again with a smile in his tone. "Nefertis, haven't you told me yet that you and Beth are familiar?" "No." Nefertis shook her head with her back to Seth, "I'm not familiar with her." "I'm sorry I can't help you, brother Seth." "Don't feel guilty," Seth laughed. "I think I'll ask Beth myself, and she should tell me. By the way, why did you reject the blue-gold god?" "Because I don't like him," Nefertis said in silence for a moment. "It's okay, there are so many gods." Seth comforted Nefertis, "Find a god you like, and he also likes you, and then marry." Nefertis whispered in response. Seth looked at Nefertis's slightly trembling back with pity in his heart. However, compared to Nefertis, he trusts his memory more. He didn't want to be the Seth in the mythological memory who raised a son for Osiris, was ultimately defeated, and then died. Furthermore, it is good that he has fused the original memories of Seth. But that's just a fusion of memories, the dominant one is his emotions. So, he won't be like the original Seth, admiring Nefertis. As for Beth, let's treat her to double the spiciness of the grilled meat next time we meet. With a silent sigh, Seth walked out of the temple and sat on a giant flower to take a nap. In the temple, Nefertis was very puzzled. She didn't understand that before Seth went missing, Seth's eyes were filled with admiration for her. In just a few decades, Seth's admiration disappeared without a trace. Even deliberately interrupted her expression of admiration just now. "Beth, is it Beth's fault?" Nefertis frowned and whispered, "If Seth can't do it, we'll have to change our minds." When Osiris returned, he saw Seth with water lilies outside the temple, and Nefertis sitting inside the temple. He walked with confusion to the giant flower of Seth's water lilies. Before he could speak, Seth sat up, his nose twitched, and he looked at Osiris. "Big brother, did you accept the sacrifice?" "When I passed by, the 300 slaves who sacrificed had already died." Osiris sighed deeply, "I accepted the sacrifice and could give them some soul protection. To prevent their spirits from disappearing in the sticks. What should be refused, big brother?" Seth disagrees with Osiris' approach. Accepting sacrifices is equivalent to compromise. Since we are going to offer sacrifices, we should strictly follow your rules, big brother. Osiris patted Seth's shoulder and said, "I've told them not to sacrifice anymore." "Stop talking about this, didn't Nefertis say anything to you?" Seth shook his head and said, "She didn't say anything. It's just that she rejected the admiration of the blue-gold god." Chapter 8. City of the Sun. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Osiris looked at his brother silently and said, "My dear brother, do you really not understand what Nefertis is trying to say?" Seth didn't hesitate and said, "I understand. But I no longer admire Nefertis. Didn't Sister Isis tell you?" I said it, Osiris sighed. I thought you would regret what you said. And as you can see, Nefertus admires you. Set said solemnly, unilateral admiration will eventually come to an end. Perhaps, Osiris sighed again, poor Nefertus. Upon hearing his words, Seth deliberately asked, Sister, are you coming back soon? Osiris nodded. Seth didn't ask again, he had already mentioned it. I hope Osiris won't have anything to do with Nefertus. In fact, Seth had plans to leave the temple of Osiris, after all, Nefertus was there. Although she was interrupted by herself when she expressed her admiration, Seth knew exactly what Nefertus was trying to say. Even if it's not said, it's always awkward. On second thought, he ran to the temple of Osiris to prevent something from happening between Osiris and Nefertus. Although his intention was to warn Osiris in advance. But now that the two gods involved are alone, he should keep an eye on them. As for the warning, we will look for opportunities in the future. For the next 10 days, Seth almost clung to Osiris's side, whether he was cultivating seeds or responding to sacrifices. Osiris was very helpless. He put down the wheat ear in his hand and said, Dear brother, why didn't I think you were so clingy to me before? I don't know, Seth pretended to be silly and then changed the topic. Big brother, why do you respond to human sacrifices? Humans have a tradition of worshipping gods and have built statues and temples. Most of them are statues and temples of the supreme sun god. Other gods and humans are rarely seen, and they live in Sun City and have almost no contact with humans. Only when it is related to one's own authority, will contact be made. Until 10,000 years ago, he allowed the gods to leave the city of the sun and built temples on the ground. Humanity has only just begun to recognize gods other than the sun god, and even began to worship them. The problem is that the blank power generated by human faith is toxic to God. Even the blank power of faith can create evil gods. As a result, the vast majority of gods do not accept worship, or respond to humanity. Power. Osiris picked up the wheat ears that had fallen on the ground. I am the god of agriculture and abundance. Agriculture and fertility rely on humanity. Protecting them is equivalent to developing my own authority. What about the blank power of faith? Seth asked curiously. He has never received any sacrifice, and those blank powers will immediately disappear once they are generated. I rejected the power that merged with me, and they fell into the statues of the temple. Osiris frowned, and they didn't disappear. I planned to seek a solution from the God of Ra for this divine conference. Set let out a sigh, thinking to himself that he had fooled him over, and then left. Osiris smiled helplessly and continued to cultivate the seeds. The next day, as the sun continued to rise, Isis returned. She had a tired expression and a foul odor, which was the smell of a pep. Osiris approached and helped Isis. Little brother, little sister, you all are here, Isis smiled. Stop talking, sister, take a break, Nefertus said with a worried expression on her face. Seth smiled at Isis and said, Sister, take a break. Isis smiled and was helped into the room of the temple by Osiris. To avoid embarrassment, Seth walked out of the temple and unconsciously looked towards the newly rising red sun. The sun still rises, which means that Apep will die again. After this divine discussion, Shu should allow himself to participate in the rotation again. Set couldn't help but sigh. He doesn't want to participate in the rotation, which means facing Apep. Having killed the demon snake that originally belonged to Seth, Seth didn't feel he could handle it. Forget it, run away when the situation is bad. Seth quickly made a decision. After staying outside the temple for half a day, Seth heard Isis's voice before entering the temple again. Isis smiled brightly, sweeping away her previous fatigue, she said. Starting tomorrow, we should go to the city of the sun. Seth agreed to this decision and wanted to see the city of the sun, the dwelling place of the gods, with his own eyes. Most importantly, he doesn't have to stare at Osiris anymore. Isis took out her anka and looked at Osiris. Osiris also took out his own anka. Then both inject divine power into anka simultaneously. Receiving divine power, two ankas suspended in mid-air in the temple, emitting a golden glow. At the same time, golden divine patterns spread from anka to the void, eventually forming the shape of a door. Upon seeing this, Seth took out his anka, injected divine power, and sent it up in mid-air, alongside the anka of Isis and Osiris. The same goes for Nefertis on the side. For anka cards tied side by side, unleashing divine power. The illusory divine pattern finally came true. A huge, pure gold gate carved with mountains, water, deserts, flowers, grass, trees, and people stands in mid-air. Seeing this, Sate reached out to retrieve anka. Isis and the three of them also withdrew anka. At the moment anka left, the golden gate split into two and slowly opened. This is the sun gate that only God can open, leading to the sun city of Heliopolis. After a moment, the door opened completely, and behind it was a red sun. "Let's go," Isis smiled and grabbed Osiris' hand, saying. After speaking, they stepped into the door. Sate also walked through the air and entered the gate of the sun. As he passed through the red sun, Seth felt warmth. After the red sun, Seth witnessed the miracle with his own eyes. A red sun hangs high in the blue sky. The magnificent city is built with pure white giant stones, and the city walls are engraved with intricate and huge patterns of the sun god. To the left of the city is a golden ocean, blooming with countless golden sleeping lotus flowers. On the right side of the city, there is an endless dense jungle. Behind the city, there is a void and chaos. In front of the city is a wide road, with boundless grasslands on both sides of the road. Although it blends memories, it is ultimately a shock witnessed with one's own eyes. However, after being shocked, Seth's gaze shifted to dozens of gods besides them. Three types of gods with animal heads and human bodies, animal heads and animal bodies, and human heads and human bodies, are walking on the road to the city. Searching for corresponding memories from memory, Seth actually knows their names and authority. Speaking of which, it seems that he is also the one who hung the beast head god. Sate suddenly thought of this and immediately searched for his fused memories. He's really a beast-headed god. The appearance of humans is not their true form. Chapter 9. Divine Sun. You are listening at novelfull.audio. From now on, we will all walk in human form, and Seth has made up his mind. "Seth, what's wrong with you?" Isis asked as she looked at Seth's face, which had changed again and again. Upon hearing this, Seth shook his head and casually changed the topic. "It's nothing, it's just that he thought of sun wine." "Sun wine," Isis said helplessly, "unless there is another god born. Otherwise, sun wine cannot be tasted. Today, there should be a divine sun walking through the door of the gods. Perhaps there will be a god, or even a master god," Osiris pondered. Nefertis chuckled lightly and said, "Brother Osiris, no one in the current hierarchy of the main deity has a divine sun background." "Yes, even the four of us have ascended to the throne as demigods," Isis continued. Sate didn't expect the topic to shift to the side of Shensi. After the gods left Sun City, many gods merged with all things and gave birth to batches of divine suns. The divine sun possesses extraordinary wisdom from birth and can live for 300 years. But throughout his life, the Son of God remained young and did not grow. Unless they crossed the gate of the god standing in the city of the sun. So the gate of God established by Ra will give them a kind of authority, making them the lower gods. However, according to memory, during the 1,000 years of becoming a god, not a single divine sun became a god. Suddenly, the sun god pattern on the pure white city wall burst into golden light. Golden falcons fly up from the city, singing loudly. A divine sun has crossed the gate of the gods. Not far away, a deity with a deer head and human body saw this and shouted loudly. Seth looked at the somewhat confused Osiris and said, "Big brother, maybe you're right. Today, there may really be a new god born." Osiris hesitated for a moment and said, "I don't know. Just take a look and you'll know," Isis smiled. Subsequently, they and other deities quickened their pace. In the city of the sun, the gods tacitly did not fly. Passing through the city gate, there are wide streets paved with giant stones and engraved with red sun god patterns inside. Along the road, there are temples of different shapes. A square temple made of white bones, a flower rack temple made of purple vines, and a temple covered with grapevines. A temple represents a deity. Seat's gaze skipped over the temples with different styles and fell on the floating temple in the center of the city. The giant stone steps facing down from all directions connect the earth, and the stone pillars engraved with divine patterns support the square dome. The stone walls behind the pillars are painted with portraits of the gods. That is the place where the divine conference is held. The Pantheon. Below the Pantheon is the Gate of the Gods. Surrounding the Gate of the Gods is the Temple of the main gods, followed by the higher gods and the lower gods in order. By the time the four saints arrived at the Gate of the Gods, hundreds of deities had already arrived. They stood with familiar gods in groups of 3 or 2, not crowded. Set walked through the gods whispering about the new god and saw a tall stone arch engraved with golden sun patterns. And an excited young girl standing in front of the arch. Wearing a red grass-woven divine crown on his head, a 4-colored wesek on his neck, wearing a white linen long dress, holding a bronze anka in his hand. "It seems to be the authority of some kind of plant," Isis said. "It's like red moon grass," Osiris said with some uncertainty as he carefully examined the girl's divine crown. Upon hearing this, Nefertus wanted to say something, but there was a white long ostrich feather stuck in one of her hair. A righteous aura appeared between her eyebrows and eyes, as the goddess dressed in a pure white dress arrived. The gaze of the gods present couldn't help but turn to this god. "It's Matt," Isis said. Seth felt a bit strange when he saw Matt coming alone and said, "Where's Thoth?" He should always be stuck by Matt's side. As soon as he finished speaking, he wore a golden and green feather divine crown on his head. Wearing a wesek made of emerald, yellow crystal, lapis lazuli, and gold on his neck. Wearing a golden ring engraved with the words of the holy book on the arms, wrists, and ankles. The male god, dressed in a yellow, white, and blue linen skirt, walked quickly to Matt's side. Isis smiled and said, "Isn't he coming?" Osiris and Nefertus laughed at this. The main god Thoth. The god of wisdom, mathematics, and medicine. Their relationship is really good. They've been stuck for millions of years without getting bored, Seth sighed. After Thoth arrived, he said a few words to Matt and walked up to the still excited girl. "Lord Thoth," the girl restrained her expression and respectfully called out. Thoth nodded slightly, then took out a piece of papyrus and a reed pen, and wrote on it. The son of the lower deity, Sonla, was born to the lower deity, Sekhmo. At the age of 290, he crossed the gate of God. Obtain the power of the red moon grass and ascend to the lower deity. After finishing writing, Thoth instructed Sangler, "You already have a place in the Pantheon. Attend the divine conference held by Lashin tomorrow." "Yes," Sandler responded loudly. Subsequently, Thoth and Matt left. The birth of a new god, recorded by the god of wisdom, is a tradition and also a recognition. Seth remembers that Thoth recorded all the things worth noting over the years since his creation. And he made a collection of books and stored them in his temple. With his consent, the gods can watch. Sure enough, it's red moon grass. Nefertus looked at Osiris with admiration. "Osiris brother, you're so amazing." Because I am the god of plants, Osiris felt embarrassed when praised. Isis pulled Osiris's hand and smiled, "That's also very impressive." Set automatically ignored these words of lack of nutrition and turned his gaze to a little boy in front of the Gate of the Gods. 11 or 12 years old, dressed in a skirt and without any divine aura, he is a divine son. He just noticed that aside from the already divine Sandler, he was the only divine son left. Seth actually hopes that he can cross the gate of God. At this moment, most of the gods did not leave and looked at this last divine son with curiosity. Isis and the other three also noticed him, not speaking, silently watching. For a moment, this godly son received a lot of attention. He stood in front of the gate of God, took a deep breath, and lifted his leg to cross it. However, Seth did not see his leg appear on the other side of the God's gate. The last god seemed to have noticed and tried to retreat. But after struggling for a moment, his body turned into ashes. Unfortunately, there's no chance of reincarnation, Isis said with pity in her eyes. After the death of the divine son, he cannot enter the underworld with the Styx river and then reincarnate. If he dies, he is dead. Seth was about to say something, but when he saw the two gods in the distance, his face was filled with disgust. Osiris, Isis, and Nefertiti saw the change in Seth's expression and followed his gaze. The faces of the three were instantly filled with disgust. And those two gods also came before the four of Seth. The surrounding gods looked at the two gods in awe. My children, the mother goddess misses you very much, the goddess in the two gods smiled kindly. Chapter 10. Hate the Past. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Huh, Isis sneered. Osiris had a mocking expression on his face, while Nefertiti ignored the two gods. Seth slightly restrained his subconscious expression and glanced at the two gods in front of him. The goddess who spoke to them wore a sapphire crown, sky blue skin, and a blue dress woven with starry light. The main god, Nut, is the god of the sky. Another male god, wearing a topaz crown and a beautiful face, wore a sky blue skirt woven by the stars. The main god Kebu. The god of the earth. They are the gods who gave birth to Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nefertiti. Based on his fused memory, the four gods were extremely disgusted with Nut and KB. If it weren't for the prohibition of God's killing of death, and the power of the goddess of sky and the goddess of earth being second only to law. So the original Seth and Isis had plans to join forces to kill the sky goddess and the earth goddess. Nut's indifference and disgust towards the four gods of Seth remained unchanged. Kebu had a sad expression on his face. The other gods watched silently. They dare not say anything, although gods cannot kill gods, they can fight gods. Discussing them in front of several main gods is something done by foolish gods. Talking about the Lord God behind his back is what a wise god should do. After the divine discussion, let's have a good talk. Nut continued to smile kindly, my dear children, don't forget your oath. After speaking, Nut and the sorrowful KB left. Seth used to instinctively express disgust towards them, but now he genuinely despises them. He hates being threatened the most, and then the threatening person leaves on their own as a winner. Osiris suppressed his disgust and said, let's go back to our temple and talk. Subsequently, the four gods of Seth walked towards the temple of Osiris. The other gods also dispersed. The arriving divine sons have already walked through the gate of the gods, and a lucky one has ascended to the throne. The goddess of the sky and the goddess of the earth sought out the gods of the desert, plants, life, and the guardian of the dead. These two incidents will quickly spread throughout the entire city of Heliopolis without any accidents. Within the temple of Osiris, which perfectly reproduces the temple on the ground. The four gods sat silently in front of the round table cut by the giant wood. Seth didn't know what to say, based on his fused memory. When Arashun created the world, he used the already created air god Shu. And the combination of Shu and the god of moisture, Tefnut, gave birth to the two gods of sky and earth as their foundation. The earth serves as the foundation, and air flows on it, above which lies the sky. The creatures born at the beginning of creation live in the air. The existing gods also live in the world. The goddess of the sky and the god of the earth love each other, and they combine to give birth to the stars. God combines with all things, giving birth to divine children. The combination of God and God gives birth to God. The stars hang high in the sky, just shining stones, without life or wisdom. Not a divine child, let alone a god. The goddess of the sky and the goddess of the earth do not want to believe that when the stars were just born, they were determined to have life. They went to pray to godLa to save the stars. Lashan told them that the stars do not possess life. At the same time, God forbade them from reuniting again. The endless proximity of the sky and the earth will slowly exhaust the air. Until heaven and earth overlap, killing all things living in the middle of heaven and earth. And a large number of deities who died due to losing power. After being banned by the god Ra, the sky goddess and the earth god sought various methods. I want to give life to the stars and make them gods. But at that time, the god of life did not exist and could not achieve this. They prayed day and night to Ra god to have new offspring. Because the twisted tree spirit living in the twisted forest fulfilled Nut's request and exhausted his long life to make a prophecy. That is the god of life to be born and nurtured by her. Lashan has always refused to reunite with the goddess of the sky and the goddess of the earth. Until 2000 years ago, the god of wisdom Thoth spoke out to persuade Ra god. Lashan promised to give them 5 days to combine and give birth to new lives. On the first day, Nut gave birth to Osiris. The next day, Nut gave birth to Isis. On the third day, Nut gave birth to Seth. On the fourth day, Nut conceived Nefertis. On the fifth day, Nut nurtured the stars again and used divine power to assist the stars in absorbing the power of the 4 gods of Seth. Attempting to use the power of 4 deities to force the stars to have life and ascend to the throne. 5 days later, Nut gave birth to the star, which still lacked life and wisdom. Afterwards, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nefertis were born because their original power was taken away. Unable to ascend to the throne and manifest power, he became a demigod between gods and divine sons. A demigod does not possess the power of a god, and apart from not dying, everything else is no different from a god's son. If that's the case alone, the original 4 saints wouldn't be motivated to kill. But because authority cannot be manifested, Nut cannot judge the authority of the 4 gods. Nut and KB imprisoned the newly born 4 gods in the sky temple at the top of a high mountain. To wait for the power to manifest one day, in order to find the god of life. At the same time, the goddess of the sky and the god of the earth forced Seth, Osiris, Isis, and Nefertis to swear to the godLa. Promise that if it is the god of life, it will give life to the stars. After being imprisoned for 1,000 years, God Ra convened a divine council and announced the removal of the 4 gods of Seth. At the same time, Ra gave strength to make the power of the 4 saints manifest and ascend to the rank of the main deity. Seizing divine power, 1,000 years of imprisonment, and making a forced oath. This is the reason why after the 4 saints became gods, they planned to surround and kill the goddess of heaven and the goddess of earth. However, there is a significant disparity in strength, coupled with the fact that one has just ascended to the throne. They didn't take action, and neither did the sky goddess nor the earth goddess. Follow the original plan. Osiris broke his silence and spoke. The original plan, Set remembers, was only finalized after decades of discussion. Firstly, Isis gave life to the stars. Then they killed the stars in front of the sky goddess and the earth god. Prohibition of killing between gods, but the stars that are given life are not gods. They killed the stars, and Ra won't interfere. The most important thing is to give everything in exchange for the stars being given life. In just a moment, the stars died in front of the sky goddess and the earth god. The taste inside is enough to drive the 2 gods crazy and scream in pain for countless epochs to come. Nefertis felt a bit depressed and said, "Will they really go crazy about the death of the stars? I don't think they have family ties." Upon hearing this, Isis smiled and said, "Whether they have it or not. The death of the stars will definitely make them feel heartbroken. After all, they've been waiting too long for this matter, Seth said, not worried about what Nefertus was worried about. I hope they can bear it.